So tonight is the Democratic primary debate live from South Carolina, and it could end up being the most important debate in the entire primary cycle because it's the last debate before the South Carolina primary this weekend, and it's the final debate before Super Tuesday next week, where basically a third of all the delegates will be allocated in one single day. And because of Bernie Sanders' massive win in Nevada, he has pretty much all of the momentum right now. And this could be seen by the neoliberal candidates as their last chance to slow Bernie down before these two key voting days. But that strategy may end up backfiring because a new poll from IPSOS and FiveThirtyEight indicates that Bernie Sanders is both the most popular candidate in the field, but also the one with the biggest pool of accessible voters. If you look at the favorability rating, which is basically taking someone's favorability minus unfavorability, Bernie Sanders has a clear lead. He's at plus 38.6. Elizabeth Warren is the only one relatively close. Buttigieg, Biden, and Klobuchar all have decent favorability ratings. Tom Steyer is slightly more popular than he is unpopular, and Michael Bloomberg is at the bottom of the list, basically the only one with negative favorability ratings at this stage, meaning that more Democrats have an unfavorable view of him than a favorable one. But what this shows, most important of all, is that Bernie Sanders is the most popular person in the field. And this absolutely shatters, yet again, another narrative about Bernie, which is that the average Democrat doesn't like him, that Bernie can't unify the party because he only has his narrow base of supporters. And beyond that, everyone else in the field absolutely hates him. But what we see here is he is the most popular person among the entire field. So when you consider who may have the opportunity to really unify everyone once the primary is done, it's really Bernie Sanders who has the best chance of doing that. And it also demonstrates that Bernie's success may not solely be driven by the fact that Klobuchar and Buttigieg and Biden and Bloomberg are all running and dividing the so-called moderate vote, but rather Bernie is winning because people like Bernie on aggregate more than everybody else. You know, there's no complication there. Bernie's the most popular. His views are popular. The most popular person with the most popular views, shocker, often ends up winning a contest. But if we look at this particular number, we also see that the narrative about Bernie having a strong base but a narrow ceiling isn't necessarily true either. This question asked people, who would you consider voting for in the primary? Meaning that you could list more than one person. You could say, I'm considering voting for all of them, or just one person, or just two or three people. And in this question, Bernie Sanders again wins over everyone else, and by a decent margin. Bernie is at 46%, meaning that basically half the field of Democratic voters would consider voting for him. That's about an 8-point lead over Joe Biden. That's a rather significant lead. After Joe Biden at 38, Warren's at about 32, Bloomberg 28, Buttigieg 28, Klobuchar 17, and Steyer 7. And what that shows again is that while not everyone is willing to vote for Bernie Sanders right now, a vast majority of people in the party have a favorable view of Bernie Sanders, and more than anyone else in the field, they are considering him for their potential vote. So what that demonstrates is that if there is a unity candidate in this process, if there is a candidate who, when this is all said and done, can be the person to bring everyone together to beat Donald Trump, it's Bernie Sanders. He's the only one who is credible on that strongly from my perspective. You might say that Elizabeth Warren on some of the metrics looks really good, or Joe Biden on some of the metrics looks pretty good, but Bernie Sanders is the only one who leads on these two crucial questions. And it really does underline how it could be very difficult for the moderate candidates to attack Bernie Sanders, because it's not just an issue of Bernie not being vetted. That's what the Washington Post and the neoliberal media and the neoliberals on Twitter are going to tell you that Bernie is only leading because everyone's treated him with kid gloves, and once they show you the real Bernie, then he'll start to tumble. But we already know who Bernie is. Millions of voters already know who Bernie is. He has among the highest name recognitions among American politicians. People know Bernie Sanders, and they love him. At least Democrats do. A lot of independents love Bernie too. They love Bernie Sanders. And so when you go at Bernie, you may well be damaging yourself because you're going after the person that's the most popular in the entire contest. And you're also going after the person with the biggest pool of potential voters, meaning you risk alienating all those people who like Bernie and or are considering to vote for Bernie, even if they're not dedicated 100% in the Bernie camp. So this is a great poll for Bernie Sanders. Bernie may not end up winning South Carolina. The polling right now shows Biden with an on average 5 or so point lead. But Bernie has vastly improved his polling in South Carolina over the past few weeks and is the odds-on favorite to win the vast majority of delegates on Super Tuesday. There may be an 11th hour attempt to take him down in this debate, but doing so could be a real risk because whether the Democratic Party elite, whether the media elite wants to admit it or not, when it comes to who the Democratic base, the regular working and middle class people who make up the Democratic Party, they love Bernie Sanders more than anyone else.